all you listeners out there, and welcome again to another edition of the Modern Farming Podcast, brought to you by the Green Gene Foundation, where we are cultivating agricultural excellence through education.
We're your hosts, Chris and Tara, and together we're growing in the knowledge about the world that feeds us.
That's right, Tara, and today we have a guest with us on the podcast, and is going to talk about some very interesting, very modern technological advances in agriculture. I'm pretty excited to welcome Miss Sonya Lee. She's the president of Ag-Tronix, and she's going to talk to us a little bit today about her trade. So welcome, Sonya. Can you tell us a little bit about yourself and maybe a little bit about Ag-Tronix first to get the listeners started off?
A native Floridian, born and raised in around Immokalee, Florida. I had no idea that I was going to end up with an agriculture technical company. I always tell people that God leads you in the way. Actually, when I graduated, I did a lot of art. I wanted to be an artist or actress, and my family goes, no way. Are we helping you do that? I got recruited by some technical. I guess I scored pretty good on ASVAB and SATs back then. And I went to a technical school, Tampa Tech, and I graduated with a degree, Associate of Science, specializing in computer electronics. Came back home to the family business, grew up in a grocery store. There was an opening at an irrigation company. And I started working at the irrigation company and then started finding these Motorola controllers that were getting repaired. And I started looking at them and started helping repair. I was also like the local tech. I was always working on the printers, the fax machines. God leads your way. And why I say that is because in fifth grade, me and two other 10 years old, we won first place in a science fair and we filtered water. So at 10 years old, we created a filter system, took dirty ditch water, and it came out clean, drinkable. So again, that's the way I say that God already knows what he's going to have you do. And somehow you shape and you form and you get in that direction. So then after working at the irrigation company, again, I started noticing the repairs, and actually two customers, a citrus grower and a tomato grower, says, hey, you really ought to start learning to repair these. Nobody else is doing this. So I got the schematics and started learning how to solder and troubleshoot the circuitry. And that's basically how I started. The company was board level technician. And I've been in now business for 32 years. And this is expanded out to now went from installation, troubleshooting, and now's a full team. We now are a turnkey company, meaning that we have design, we do irrigation design, a full installation team. So we sell the smart technology, Motorola controllers and other items, as well as install service. And so we're a turnkey company for our clients. It's just not putting the controllers and bye-bye. We're there to help support any other additional repairs, other parts of the pump stations. So one of the most important things to know that everything at a pumping station is tied to the controllers. So over the years, after I would fix the controller, I'd give it back to the customer, and the customer would come back and go, Miss Sonya, the computer's doing this. It's not working. This is going on. That's going on. So then I had to go to the farms and start learning about everything at the pump station. So I then started going to the manufacturer school. So I'd go to valve school, I'd go to filter school, I'd go to engine school about the automation panels on the engines, water meter school, flow meter. So everything on the pumping stations, my team can help service and get parts. So that's what sets us aside a lot of times from other competitors, is that having a team that basically a one-stop shop that you can call and know that when we leave, we're going to know what the issue is. We're either going to fix it or we're going to go get the parts that we need to be able to come back and get the client running again.
Your company is so much more than just irrigation. Tell us a little more about that.
So one of the neat things about Motorola, and let's say that sets us aside from other competitors like, Rainbird, Toro, Ag, is these are smart controllers, meaning that if you lost power, for example, a lot of them are, the other controllers get their information from the cloud. Yes, we do have radio controlled Wi-Fi, cellular, but if for some reason the basic system goes down, the controllers are smart enough that they still water, they still fertilize, they still turn on and off the valves. And then if they get their communication back, then they feed the data. But yes, we also have third-party ancillary items that we add: weather stations, soil moisture sensors, EC sensors, pH sensors, pressure sensors. So again, besides monitoring the water and the fertilizer, we can know if the pressure gets too high on the pump station, alert somebody. If there's a high flow, a low flow, meaning a pipe break, to alert somebody to send a text. It's all about conserving the water and the nutrients. If the grower is overwatering, he is then also flushing his nutrients, which then he's spending more money on fertilizer and more money on diesel fuel or electric. So with the smart technology, as far as soil moisture sensors and different devices and weather stations, we can put into the software of the controller. For example, if you're irrigating and it rains 1 inch, shut down the irrigation system. Or if you're monitoring the soil moisture, if the soil moisture hits 18%, then stop that irrigation and move to another zone. So there's what we call if and when conditions, depending on the atmosphere and what's going on the farm with the weather, the wind, the temperatures, and all that type of stuff. And a lot of your older farmers that have had this technology for over 30 years, they don't just waste water. The biggest abusers of water is gated communities and golf courses. That's been proven through the Water Management District. So a farmer, for example, are so precision, meaning they don't water by time, majority of them. They literally say, this block, I need 40,000 gallons of water, pre-wet 10,000 gallons of water, apply 128 gallons of fertilizer, and then proceed to the next block. Maybe it's a smaller block. I need 32,000 gallons of water, pre-wet 100 gallons of fertilizer, and then move on. And then they know if the fertilizer didn't go out or if there's an issue. Again, the system will alert, send texts, and then they'll go see what the issue is, correct it, and then start all over again.
So anyone who's messed around with irrigation, whether it's large scale or small, knows that it's a lot of work. Things fail, things get plugged up. So your systems, you can really fine tune and help yourself with all of these issues that come along with irrigation that make it difficult.
Yes. Being a Motorola dealer, I can say Motorola team of controllers, as we're like 10 years advanced of any other technology out there. Matter of fact, my engineers right now, we're already writing the code for future AI. Quite interesting, because what's going to happen is it's collecting all the data, all the watering data, all the fertilizing data, all the weather data, the soil moisture sensors. So in the future, for example, if today I was a grower and I'm putting in zone 1, I'd like 30,000 gallons, 120 gallons of fertilizer, blah, blah, blah. Then the AI may come in and say, oh, well, we see you're going to apply that amount, but from last year's history, when you did this the same time, the same day, the weather was this, the evapotranspiration was this. Maybe the AI will then give a suggestion. Well, maybe you should only put 20,000 gallons of water on there. So it's going to be doing a calculation and all the weather calculations and then do a recommendation. Again, it's a recommendation. The farmer then will make the decision if he'd like to use the AI recommendation or go ahead and apply what he wants to apply.
Very interesting. Interesting stuff.
Can you get it on your phone? I mean, how convenient is it?
So all the farmers, they have a phone app, so they can go to their app and log in, turn on and off, troubleshoot in the field. They could actually be hunting in Georgia and monitor their irrigation, as they're out there.
You're really doing a full irrigation system integration,
Yes, so I'm now what I call a system integrator or project manager. I do design. So if you had a farm, and again, it doesn't matter if it's a 1 acre farm, a greenhouse, or a 20,000 acre farm. So I have clients that have one pump station to 20,000 acre farmer with 106 pumping stations, and you have one man at the command center. I'm going to go to your farm, evaluate everything, come up with a plan. For example, if you have manual butterfly valves, we're going to have to automate the valves. We test the water to see what kind of water you have in case we need to install filters to clean your water for the drip and for the different applications. And then at the end, I come to you with a package from A to Z. So I have teams that we can build the whole thing. You can start with an irrigation design all the way up to the end. Probably majority of them I do are retrofit, meaning that they're already there and they've just been running manually for so many years, and now they decided that they want to go automated. But again, I've had them from scratch all the way to retrofit.
I'm hearing that you're one of the first women in this agricultural business, and I'd like to have you tell us a little bit about that.
Since I started Ag-Tronix at 23 years old, a young female going into the farming, it was challenging. But at the end, I've shown them so much knowledge and experience that now I'm the go-to. It was funny because here I'd come out with my little tool bag and start checking things. And then the guys, when I go, well, something's wrong with the filter, let's open it up. And they give me like that deer in the headlight look, like, oh my gosh, this woman is fixing to tear apart my filter system. And I look at them and I say, it's okay. It's already broke. Either we're going to open it up and fix it. If not, we're going to close it and call somebody and get the parts we need. So they're like, okay, go ahead. But, so challenges like that. I went and did my job is what I did. And so now I'm well known. And like I said, I've been called to fix all kinds of stuff, consult on different projects. I'm not a quitter. I mean, that's the whole point is when you have, somebody's life, that's their crop, that's their life, and they're not getting the water and the tomatoes are starting to wilt, they're freaking out. So it's always that I've never ran away from a problem. It's my job to solve the problem or come up with a solution or find someone to help me solve the problem. And that's probably been the most inspiration or the thing that's got me ahead of others in the technology is just never giving up, because it don't bother me. It's one of those things. It's like, why can't I fix it? What is the issue? I'm going to dream about it. It's going to bother me until I can get it fixed. And I guess that mentally is what set me aside.
Yeah, I love it. That's great attitude. Great attitude to have. So you said you started about 30 years ago working on this kind of stuff. What have you seen that's really evolved? Take us through that journey a little bit of how everything's changed in the last 30 years.
I started with DOS, if people don't even know what DOS is. So basically, Motorola world to start with, we had little keyboards. And so you would go up and program them on these little keyboards that were there. Then when they started Windows is when we started getting the better of the software coming out. The internet, the speed, the servers now compared to the older ones, it's just faster and easier. That was a challenge to get the guys to go from old technology that they knew to start learning to use the iPhones and the software and things like that. Back then, we didn't have a lot of our soil moistures. We wasn't integrating. So that's another important thing that my team that we've done is I didn't like it that the farmer had to look on this computer for weather stations. Then they had to look on this computer if they wanted soil moisture. Then they had to look on this. So my engineers, we started taking the API, the code. So if Davis is our weather stations, they give us the API, then we can write the code to bring it into the Motorola system. And so that's a big thing, is now bringing all the technology together where it used to be separate. And now they can get all these graphs and data and again make these smart decisions with these commands with the technology. So I guess that's kind of what I've seen grow over the time, the different technologies, then how to get them all to come together and play in the sandbox together.
Yeah, I think that's huge because you could be missing something, right? When you have that whole picture right in front of you in one screen or one area, that helps. So when you mix AI in with it, it takes your brain so long to analyze data points, and AI can do it in a second and bring in billions of data points. That's one thing that AI brings to the table. It's not just past performance, but it also can help predict future things because of all the data it can look at, which I think is really powerful. Put some ease on the growers too, because they don't have to spend hours and hours crunching numbers and trying to figure stuff out.
I think it's cool that if they're away from their farm, they can still be monitoring what it's doing. And that's so important to the growers of today, that they use that technology that's there. And I know the younger kids have no problem with technology, but the older ones, I'm sure it was a struggle to get them on board.
I got one farmer, this is pretty funny. He's in North Carolina, and he had the keyboard for 25 years. Well, they finally was like, you've got to upgrade, sir. We're working on getting all the computers set up. Again, his wife, Christy, thank God, she's very helpful with computers and stuff. He called me up after we started putting it in. He was madder than a hornet's nest. My Sonya, I can't run this. I can't see my fertilizer. I said, we're still setting it up. Just be calm. Just be calm. Well, then a couple weeks later, we got him set up. And he called me, and I'm like, oh my gosh, it's Mr. Pete. He's going to chew me out again. Oh my gosh. He called me up and goes, boy, this is the best stuff I ever had. I can sit here and have coffee in the morning, see my pumps running. And then he writes me a recommendation, and the recommendation says that he drove over 200 miles a day from dusk till dawn, running to check the 12 pumping stations. And then if there was a fertilizer issue, he wouldn't know until he came back the next day. And then he'd have to reset everything. And then he was talking about how much water, like 20% savings in water and nutrients. So that's just one of those good stories of one going from old technology to new technology, being mad, and then all of a sudden just happy as he can be. And a matter of fact, then he called Scott, my engineer, one day, and Scott's like, yes, sir. And he goes, Scott, guess what I'm doing? He's like, yes, sir. He goes, I'm sitting at the beach with my feet in the sand. He says, I never would have been able to do this before because I always was stuck at the farm. So again, that even helped him be able to spend more time with his family. And like you said, not be just rushing from dusk till dawn, and be able to monitor his farms.
And it's so important to hear those stories because we don't get a lot of new young kids that want to farm. A lot of it is because it's a lot of hard work, and it still is. When people can see that you're not tethered to the soil and have to be there all day, every day, it makes it more appealing if that's something you're interested in. It also might take someone who's not interested in farming, but interested in doing kind of the things that you do, Sonya, where they work on irrigation systems, they work on computers and software and controllers. So that's another aspect of agriculture that people can get into if they don't necessarily want to be, out in the field working on crops and fighting that fight. So I think more people need to hear about this because not everybody wants to program video games. So you have alternatives, and agriculture is one of them.
We're seeing the diesel engine, the filters. You see my controllers in the back, and the fertilizer tank, the flow meters. So all that ties to the controllers. And then this one, for example, is showing you probably 85% of our clients are solar and diesel engines. So there's no power out in a lot of the places. That one's showing a rain bucket.
And those are all being controlled by your systems.
Yes. Those are my boxes right there. Here's some of them, like custom screens.
Okay, so that's a shot of a computer screen with different gauges.
That's rain buckets. That's a bunch of rain buckets.
Okay. Interesting. So it's not just numbers on a screen. You do graphical.
Yes. And it's custom named, meaning like a Rainbird timer or something. It's just always zone 1, zone 2. No, if we call this Henry block or zone 12, it's all named to the client's language that they speak. So here's showing some of the programming.
Okay. So you do this all custom for each grower that you work with. So that's like a full
Yes.
service type. You're really getting into their system.
This even shows field shots. So this is showing where soil moisture sensors are.
Okay, so you got it integrated with the mapping software too, so you can literally see where they are. Okay.
Yes. Then I also wanted to share automation of throwout pumps. You know, in Florida, it's feast or famine. So sometimes we don't have enough water, and sometimes we have too much water. So we even automate the diesel engines.
Okay.
On the throwout pumps. We can also, in the software, put in levels of the canals or the ponds. This is like a radar. It's like a sonic beam that we can measure the depth of the canal.
So you don't just have little, boxes and computers. You've got a substantial amount of physical wiring and devices in those boxes that you guys go out and actually hardwire and work on too.
So we have 3 different ways of communication in our system, and it's radio, Wi-Fi, or cellular connection. So for example, the farm that had 106 pumping stations, you don't want 106 cellular bills. So again, it's all the command center. What I call the command center is the unit that's hooked to the physical PC in the office. We have then a radio that then by antenna talks to the other units out into the field. So again, this is why another thing is live 24/7. So you have to have that dedicated PC or server there to be live 24/7 to be able to monitor, control, collect the data, as well alert the grower if there is a problem.
And how big is your company, Ag-Tronix?
Now we're down to 4. I've had as many as 9. So depending on how busy or not busy, we just recently went to a career day at like high schools and stuff to educate kids on, it's more out there in the farming world than just picking tomatoes, There's going to be diesel engine mechanics, plumbers, all types of work that's done at a farm.
So, Sonya, I know you have some new innovative things that are coming. Can you tell us what's new in the industry?
Well, one of the things is oxygen sensor. We've had soil moisture for a while. The new oxygen sensor, we've had some growers looking at it. It's going to be measuring the oxygen in the soil. So then I guess they can make improvements by using the oxygen. I'm going to be starting to introduce some frequency in the water. There's going to be some new technology coming out with some frequency vibrations, which I tell people I've been in frequency for a long time, meaning that here's a good example. This is my wave watch. It's frequency based. So when I tell people about frequency, my voice is a frequency, your voice is a frequency, the birds are in a frequency, the wind is in a frequency. There's some new technology that I'm learning about that somehow we're going to be doing some frequency in the water that may send some messages to the plants to make them react. Maybe a defense against a bug. The frequency is going to trigger the plant, I guess, to be a fighter and defend itself.
Any advice or anything you guys want to talk about before we wrap this up?
I always say my advice is quit complaining about it, make it happen. So
I love it. Cool. That's about all the time we have for our podcast today.
Thanks for listening to Modern Farming, and be sure to follow us, share, and join us again as we grow in the knowledge about the world that feeds us.